Hello, this is Neil Buchanan with Rock Our World. I have a mixture of thoughts here going together. We have, see if I can pull it all together. It's in a large sense, it's a message to one person in particular, but in a greater sense, it's a message to the entire world. Those are the two ends of the spectrum, and they always have been on this, whatever we call it, YouTube channel, Rock Our World. The Lord is moved us into the last days. We are at the stage where the birth pangs are getting intense, and the coming of the Lord is very, very close. We're going to be going on the second Exodus. The tribulation, what the world has called the apocalypse, terrible things are about to happen in the world, but the Lord is doing all these things, and He has a specific purpose which the church has not understood. Judgment begins at the house of God. So He's starting with a few people, and I'm sure the Lord, I know the Lord has used thousands of avenues to get this thing rolling, going back. Let's roll it back at least a few years, say 20 years. One of the ways He's used it is He gave a very, very extensive vision to Rick Joyner, and the vision, he had to keep correcting Rick to get his own theology out of it, because just like everybody else in the religious world, our theology has very, very skewed. But God's intention from the beginning was to restore all things, and it would be a progression, and it's speeding up. Everything's speeding up. We're coming to the crisis at the end of the age, but it's the beginning of a new age. So it's the difficult spot between two ages, the transition of the ages. And the Lord calls it the birth pangs of the Messiah. That's one of the metaphors He gives it. So going back to Rick Joyner, the Lord needed someone. And He finally told Rick, He said, you've only walked 20% in what I've asked you to do. Gave him very, very poor marks, but there was nobody better. So Rick was the best of the worst of all of us. And He used him He gave him a very extensive vision over the course of 15 years. And He told Rick, now quit mixing your theology in with this. I just want you to write it down the way I give it to you and get it out there. And it was widely received in a broad spectrum of Christianity, and hopefully the Jewish world also accepted it, because the average logical, sharp-minded human being who was a believer could see exactly what God was talking about. And the church is in horrible condition. It's just the way it is. There are no righteous people, so to speak, in amongst the believers. But the Lord is moved into the next gear. He's calling the bride out. They don't exist right now, but going back to Rick's, the vision that God gave to all of us through Rick, he was the conduit. He was the donkey that spoke, and that's what my wife and I call ourselves. I'm the donkey, she's the rock. The Lord said He already did speak through donkeys to Balaam, and He told if we wouldn't do our job, He'd raise up rocks to speak. And that's where Silicon Valley comes into it. Here we're in the high-tech age, and I can do all this amazing stuff on a computer with the help of a few people, and it's all stored on rocks, silicon chips. Anyway, it's quite amazing how can use, their memory chips are rocks. At any rate, I'm getting a little off topic here. So what the Lord did starting, let's say it was 20 years ago, he'll explain the whole thing. He's trillion times smarter than me, so I'm not going to try and explain God. So he got this ball rolling. I listened to this vision. I knew it was extremely important, and I took it to heart, and I've pulled it out every 2-3 years over the last number of years, and I reread it, and I see more and more of what I'm supposed to be doing. And it was speaking to me, and I know there's hundreds and thousands of other people out there worldwide that it was affecting the same way. So God needs a few people going ahead, a voice. Well, actually, we'd be sort of like John the Baptist, who he sent ahead of him to be a voice speaking out in the wilderness. Repent, turn from your sins. So that's, I guess that's my job, and the same job that I'm going to say 5,000 other people. And that's a reference to Elijah when he was ran from Jezebel and was whining to the Lord, and I'm the only one, and the Lord said, nope, I got 5,000. So that's the number I'm sticking to, the story I'm sticking to, and there's 5,000 guys like me doing this in a variety of ways, speaking out a voice in the wilderness. And for me, a big part of that was stirred by this vision that God gave through Rick Joyner. Now, God, I'm sure did the same thing 1,000 different ways. How he raised up these guys that are mouthing off in the wilderness of the YouTube. And so anyway, I'm going to try and mix a whole bunch of things together here. I got a specific message for one person, but it is to be applied also to the 7.4 billion people out there. A call to step it up, to clean up our lives, clean up our churches, clean up our governments, and clean up the world. And ultimately, the Lord is going to destroy Babylon, which is our world system. I'll give one specific teaching on Babylon. I've given a lot of details so far, but I'll be more specific what Babylon actually is, and why we're being called to leave it, and when that will be. It's not right now, but it's very close when we're being asked to leave Babylon. And so we got to know what it is. How do we leave? Where do we go to? How do we look after ourselves? No. How does the Lord look after us? How do we learn how to let the Lord look after us? Might be the best way to put it. So what's happened here is my wife was given a very, very stern, specific teaching and correction to give to a church in town. And of course, the churches are overseen by somebody. There's always a line of authority. So anyway, this correction had been given a number of times over the years, but the powers that have been in place haven't responded. And so anyway, the timeline's out. The message went to the leader of this church, and it's like, this is the time. You got to do something. And what I wanted to convey is that, in a sense, it's a compliment. The Lord starts. He doesn't. I put it this way. He doesn't invest in a dead horse. I've used that terminology in some of the things I've been involved in. I don't want to waste a whole bunch of time on something that's not doing anything. So the Lord is confident. I'm going to say this is me speaking, that this gentleman is going to respond positively, and he's going to turn his church around. It's a pretty big church in town here in Regina, and there's going to be awesome things happen, and there's going to be some fallout. Eventually, only 1/10 of believers will follow the Lord and his ways. The Lord's going to divide the 9/10 from the 10th, but I'm going to guess that when this pastor and other pastors in town, and this will spread, start correcting their congregations and pulling up, step up to the plate, fix things in your families, quit indulging in adultery and pornography, and you name it. There's lying, stealing, all this stuff that is in families. And of course, it is there because the leadership isn't teaching properly. So everybody has to take responsibility. And I'm going to bring in teaching, a very brief one, on the Ahab spirit. I've talked a little bit about this in a few previous episodes, but the Lord had to straighten this out in my own life between my wife and myself. I was an Ahab spirit. I had an Ahab spirit on me, and then of course, then my wife has a problem with me. I create a problem, and then she has a problem because I created it. And this is how it works. The Ahab spirit is the highest spirit in the demonic forces. When in Ephesians 6:12, when it says we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, and he lists, it goes through kind of some rhetoric, but the last line is, and against wicked spirits in high places. Well, the Ahab spirit is the highest level of demonic force. It's the most powerful, the most intelligent, and the devil figured this out long time ago. He had to destroy marriages. That's the only way he's going to destroy the kingdom, or the Lord's process in bringing the kingdom to the earth. The only way he's going to destroy it is to destroy a marriage. And then once that falls, well, then the church falls, governments, so on. Everything fails if the marriage fails. So anyway, back to my own story. Because of the hurts in my life and my wife's life, the devil's then has an entry point to get these demons working in our lives. I become this wussy husband that won't step up to the plate, won't deal with the problems that are in my family, and specifically understanding the points of the Torah. Just something simple. I'll use something simple. Okay, my kid's lying. That's the point of the Torah. You don't lie. So I have to step up to the plate and make sure my child understands he cannot lie. That's against the rules. Now step this thing up to a teenage girl, 17 years old, and she comes home pregnant. And is dad stepping up the plate? Or maybe he didn't step up the plate, and that's the problem. Well, that is actually what has happened. Because teenage girls don't end up pregnant if dad's doing his job. So that's a little more serious situation. But again, are we dealing with it according to the Lord's instructions? And are we stepping up the plate and doing something? Or are we just sitting back as a wussy husband and not dealing with anything? And letting our family go to the dark place in a hat basket. Hand basket? However they say that, so then that's the situation Pat and I home. So the Lord dealt with both of us. Actually, Pat cast the demon out of me. I don't even think it was a week ago. And it was just amazing because it happened. I thought she was just getting in my face, pointing at that demon and yelling at it and saying, get out of here. Anyway, I'm driving to Regina, and then the Lord showed me that my wife has actually cast this Ahab demon. Well, not out of me, it's on me. I'm not possessed, but that's how demons work for the most part. They ride you, literally. And again, read the vision God gave to Rick Joyner. The demons ride on believers' backs. That's the kind of the closest control they get in our lives, is when they ride us and control us and put words in our mouths and thoughts in our minds and so on. Anyway, that thing's gone now, and my mind is a lot clearer. But the Lord immediately started teaching me about the Ahab spirit, and he also started teaching Pat about the Ahab spirit. And then he immediately, once we got things sorted out a little bit in our marriage, and I'm talking, this is just like 5-6 days ago, then he immediately gets back to this correction for this church in town. And of course, a church has a leader, so you got to go to the leader. So now we're stepping it up one level. There's the marriage where the man is the Ahab, and that's the problem. And then the wife tries to do something about the poor situation in her family, and she gets attacked because she's not got her husband's covering. So to take it up to the next level, the pastor is in charge of the church. It's his job to be the covering. If he's not teaching properly, or if he's got sins in his own life, then there's a huge problem, and then the devil can attack everybody in that church. So back to this idea that it's a compliment. God is not going to ride a dead horse. He is going to put his efforts into where there's the most fruit. So it's a compliment in that respect that this particular pastor is being called to do some really tough stuff, but God's expectation is that he'll do it, and that church will turn around. There'll be a lot of fallout, could be even loss of 50% of the congregation, but then they'll be walking closer and closer with the Lord. And hopefully I can get an inroad into teaching the correct understanding of things, and I'm not going to say I got everything right, but I am saying that the Lord is teaching me a lot of stuff, and he's giving my wife and I a lot of strong evidence that these are words straight from the Lord. And just like he corrected Rick, my wife and I and all believers have the challenge of dividing our own ideas and our own thoughts and our own biases, our own wrong theology. Divide that away and get rid of it out of the clear messages from the Lord. So we'll continue on this path, and my expectation is this particular church will get turned around. There'll be lots of fallout, but then it'll be a pure, it'll be a church pleasing to the Lord. They'll start doing their job of equipping the saints and teaching them how to make disciples, and that'll spread all over Regina and all over southern Saskatchewan, and just like Pinky and the Brain, we're going to take over the world. Signing out. Neil Buchanan with Rock Our World, Daniel 2.